when I check into a hotel room and we're with the Alice Cooper band, it's a Hilton. When the vampires check into a hotel room, it's usually a Ritz-Carlton. So there's a little bit of a difference. And I step on the bus, they step onto the private jet.
Yeah, right.
So.
Oh my God, guys! You're listening to 2020. This is the show. I'm Benny Goodman. We're supposed to do this fast, so I'm just going to get right into it. I'm with my cohorts, my compatriots, my partners in crime, which we're trying to trademark by saying it as much as possible. If you haven't subscribed yet, 2020-d.com. Siobhán Cronin and Cory Peza. How are you?
I'm deaf now.
Yeah, very deaf, and I think it'd be difficult to trademark partners in crime, but we can go for it. We'll give it a shot.
This week we have Ryan Roxie, who you might know from Alice Cooper's band, as well as In the Trenches with Ryan Roxie, as well as he has a guitar. I can't even speak. A 12. Is it a step program?
Nope. System 12.
System 12. System 12 program where he'll teach you how to play guitar much better than I'm capable.
Yeah, the System 12 guitar method.
So anyway, let's just dive right into it. Part 1 with Ryan Roxie. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of 2020. I'm Siobhán Cronin here, as always, with my compatriots, my cohorts, my co-hosts. Earlier in the day than usual, we've got Benny Goodman and Cory Peza. How's it going, guys?
Hello, Siobhán, with the con accento, with the Shavan, but it could be Chevron.
We're sporting our coffees today instead of the other poisons that we usually sport on this
Sprite.
Episode.
I already drank
However,
my coffee.
Yeah, except our guest.
Our guest is not, though, so let me introduce him first. Today, I'm so excited. We have Ryan Roxie, guitar player for Alice Cooper, of many other projects, also host of In the Trenches with Ryan. Is it Ryan Roxie or In the Trenches with Ryan? What's the proper?
Just In the Trenches, however you want to Google it, it's fine.
Okay.
Put my name in there, podcast, it usually comes up.
Yeah, so one of our prior episodes when I was researching for Satchel, I came across, I think it was an episode that you had with him. So that's kind of how I got to know him a little bit. So discovered you and, really cool podcast, obviously a great musician. So I'm excited to dive in and talk more to you.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you guys making the time difference work, because I'm basically here at the North Pole right now. And you guys are, in my home country, but my latest home country has been Sweden for quite a number of years. Luckily, I've been able to travel back and forth from the U.S. to Sweden for quite a while.
So how did you end up in Sweden in the first place? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, are you doing the Queen thing? Like, did you make so much money over in the United States that you have to go to Sweden for tax purposes so you can have like the Freddie Mercury excesses?
No, because then Sweden would tax you more. Aren't you? Like, Sweden is definitely known
You're thinking about
for
something else, like
It's a
Switzerland.
I'm in the
socialistic
70s,
country.
bro.
No, but that's even in the 70s it was high. You know what I'm saying?
So you've met Benny. He's going to say lots of incorrect things very confidently throughout the episode.
It's okay because a
It's
lot
all
of people.
fake news.
At least you said Sweden and not Switzerland, because that's the first mistake most people make right out of the gate.
I love my watch, man. It's great.
Well, it's either like, so you're from. I have a friend that lives in Switzerland. You guys must know each other. It's like, no, we're like 3-hour plane ride away. So it would be like me saying, do you know some guy in Toledo, Ohio? And you go, yeah. But I live in Sweden. Our guitarist Tommy Henriksen from the Alice Cooper band, he lives in Switzerland, and a lot of times that distinction is not clarified, especially to most people that live in the United States, because, as we all know, the
We don't know
world
geography.
revolves around the United States.
Exactly, yeah.
I bet you there's some guy out there that's like, there's 2 guys in Alice Cooper's band? I thought there was just one dude that lived in Switzerland.
Always remember, the entire flat Earth revolves around the United States.
Right, of course.
It's
With
all
the
in
dinosaurs. With the
It's all in the
dinosaurs.
Oh
The
my
dinosaurs
gosh.
and the guns. They have the guns killing the dinosaurs.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what did
Jumping right into conspiracies. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if I believe that yet.
Paul McCartney was there, though, with Tupac Shakur just smoking one.
All right, again,
Yeah.
Ben is going to say a lot of bullshit that is not true, but very confidently so.
I will wait until Jon Stewart confirms it, and then it'll be fine.
Right.
No, but as far as getting over to Sweden, like what? That's it's obviously a
How
more
did it all
unique.
start?
Yeah.
I was married before to a Swedish girl, and we we met in the States and we lived there for many number of years. We moved over. I always wanted, since I was a little kid, to live in Europe. I don't know why, and especially the colors of Sweden, I think, were something. So you can call it like this, fulfilling your destiny or whatever. But even in the early days of going to the International House of Pancakes, I would go for the Swedish pancakes. That would be my pancake of choice. And and eventually I wanted to live there. I was married to a Swede. We moved there. We have 2 kids. They're growing up. We've since split apart many years ago. And I'm still here, though. And not for long. I mean, there will be another destination. I remarried a couple years ago to a very cool girl from Cape Town, South Africa.
Wow.
So I know it sounds kind of like a James Bond film, but it's really not. It's just like I just happened to meet a girl from Sweden, moved to Sweden. We got split up.
So you went from ABBA to Dave Matthews.
There you go.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was going to say you didn't move there just to write pop hits for America.
I would prefer ABBA to Dee Antwoord.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And for those of you
That's
listeners
scary.
that don't know Dee Antwoord, that is the answer. And that should be your next Google search and rabbit hole to go down.
I've seen them live a bunch of times.
What?
So are you a
You
fan
have?
of Dee Antwoord?
I
Yolani
know
fucking Fesser. You've seen Yolani fucking Fesser.
Oh my God, dude! I saw him at Lollapalooza. I saw him at the House of Blues. Yeah, man, it's a crazy.
I never got to see them live.
It's a
to see
very well. The
Intense.
thing is, so yeah, there's a lot of rap. I've seen a lot of rappers, right? A guy like Eminem, he has a lot of backing tracks, and the tracks he's not doing, where he doesn't have backing tracks, you can hear how winded he is. He's been doing it a long time. Those guys are fire. Like they literally sound unbelievable, and their stage show is like tantamount to Marilyn Manson when Marilyn Manson was actually edgy.
Well, I mean, there's no doubt about it. Ninja and Yolandi. I
think, yeah,
pronounce their
Yolandi.
names. Yeah, I have hard times pronouncing names, just like Siobhán, as we went.
You just killed it. That was
before the
great.
podcast. But I think I got it right. But I was turned on to that band before I met my wife Bianca, who's from Cape Town. But she speaks fluent Afrikaans. So I didn't know, like, if you don't know Afrikaans, you kind of only know half of the band because she's constantly translating what Afrikaans words that they use in between those songs. And I'm not sure, Cory or Siobhán, if you guys have been heavily into Dee Antwoord?
No, just kind of
Paul,
coming
who's
across.
next to me, our drummer Paul is a super Dee Antwoord fan, and
Okay.
I mean, but just so you know, like a song, so you know, Siobhán is like, I rubbed my dick on expensive things. I think is one of the songs that they sing.
Fatty Boom Boom is like,
Yeah.
I think you're freaky.
I think you freaky and I like you a lot is a terrifying video that if you haven't seen it, just as like it's in the same vein of like 9 Inch Nails or Tool or Marilyn Manson back in the day, where it's just like you'll leave feeling dirty.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that they've been on festivals in Europe that we've done, because I remember hearing that name and like being surprised at what it actually was, because I was thinking like it would be a rock group or I don't know, something. Like
But it
I
is
didn't know
kind
what
of
to
a rock
expect.
group. To me, at one point, I was saying in some interviews that they're like the most rock and roll band out there, even though
Interesting.
they do hip hop, techno, and rap all together into this weird, like, sort of
It's the attitude. It's like that Sex Pistols attitude. Like, we
All
don't
about
give
the
a fuck.
attitude.
They really
Punk
don't
rock,
give
too.
a fuck. They do a lot. Like, if you do any research on these guys, like, there aren't a lot of fucks given in the Dee Antwoord camp.
I think the whole reason why they didn't end up breaking as big is because obviously they were big in the States for a while, but I think their A&R guy was Jimmy Iovine, if I'm not mistaken, and I think they kind of called him out on more than a couple songs, and I think, as we all know, when you start sort of bad rapping the record label, whether it's in your songs or whether
Big
it's
Brother's
in
listening
interviews.
to you, Ryan. Big Brother's listening.
I've seriously been indie for so many years now that what can they do? I've hung around long enough that people are finally starting to notice. Isn't that old Mick Jagger quote? And I've been around, and I've been on a couple major labels. With my first band that I was with, Electric Angels, we were on Atlantic Records, and I mean, we friggin' tried to play the game. We really did, but you know, we were up against a lot of bands in the '80s that were like the Wingers of the world, Skid Row of the world. You know, a lot of bands that were like really, really popular on Atlantic Records during that time and during that era. And it was just hard for us to be in that game because we weren't hair metal, even though we would open up and tour with some of the best hair metal bands out there. I mean, we did our first U.S. tour with a band called Danger Danger. Mm-hmm. We got Naughty Naughty. And we and we also did another tour with a band called Hurricane, which had the Kelly Hansen is the lead singer, who's now the singer of Foreigner. So you realize that all these bands and all these musicians that are still touring today, I know them from back, you know, when I had a foot in the old school. And luckily I was living in Los Angeles at probably one of the coolest times to ever live there. I'm sure there's people that come from different.
We've heard all the stories of our previous guests.
I love hearing these stories. Yeah.
You mentioned though that you know you were kind of dabbling in playing the game. Obviously, the industry's changed since the '80s. But what about that game were you either not able to fully play or you know?
I just think our band was a little bit more '70s, like and had our foot more into those English bands, with obviously my favorite band being Cheap Trick, who were obviously influenced by the Beatles. But put it this way, we made our first album in London with Tony Visconti producing, who's a huge producer, produced all the T-Rex albums, produced some great Bowie tracks as well, Young Americans, and produced another band called The Alarm, which was really great as well. And he's just done string arrangements for Paul McCartney, Band on the Run, for Christ's sake. The guy is just a legend. But he was an English producer, so our album inherently had an English sort of vibe to it, maybe a couple of years too early, you know? Because then a couple of years later, all these cool bands from England start busting out: Oasis, Radiohead, Happy Monday, Charlatans UK, and they have this sort of English production value where I don't think our album did, and it was hard to compete with those albums that were coming out that had more of the Bow Hill snare drum, or you know, or basically the Mike Clink production, and you know. All these, I know I'm dropping a lot of names that if you look at the liner notes, they're all there.
Well, Mike Clink, I mean, obviously Appetite for Destruction. So,
yes,
like, I mean,
yes.
that's a good drum sound. I'm a fan.
Absolutely.
So like, I mean, listen, so you mentioned something very important. If you look at the liner notes, I did. You know what I mean? Because I think it's very important to understand, like, Martin Birch was the sound of Iron Maiden. And if you listen, you know, and if you listen to the Zeppelin stuff, it's like, okay, I don't know a lot about mastering, but I know there's this guy, George Marino, that kept coming up. So the
George
first
Marino
dude
at Sterling Sound.
I had ever asked for to master my record, which we paid a shit ton of money, was George Marino. And ironically, it was like towards the end of his life and his ears were done. And I was like, I don't feel like this sounds very good. So we sent it to Ten Jensen, who was another guy I had seen in so many records. And, you know, it's one of those things where you have to learn. If you're interested in, like, look at what's behind you, the guitars, all the recording studio stuff.
Yeah,
you don't
amazing.
just get to that level by not reading that Mike Clink did this, or that Ron St. Germain did that, or Eddie Kramer did these records, and the reason they were awesome was X, Y, and Z, and then go, oh, that's amazing. I should do that.
The exact same reason why we had George Marino produce or master our record, the Electric Angels album, was because it was on the back of every single record that I had grown up listening to. And we did it and mixed it in New York. And just so you know, if you're going rail down the liner notes, it was Jim Mitchell that got all those great sounds on that Appetite for Destruction and the Illusions records. He was engineering it as well. And Jim Mitchell I know for years and years because we worked together in Slash's Snake Pit as well, and he produced my very first sort of solo type project band called Dad's Porno Mag. And that was a co-production between the band, Jim Mitchell, and Pink's drummer, Mark Schulman.
Oh, wow.
So you see all these names and all these guys and musicians sort of all sort of...
Yeah, it's a small
Listen,
world
it all
once
goes
you
back
get
to
there.
Iron Maiden. Do you remember Iron Maiden's records, a real live one and a real dead one?
A real live one and a real dead one.
Well, if you bought those records, there was a fold-out of the entire lineage of Iron Maiden, of all the bands that Dave Murray and Steve Harris and Bruce Dickinson and Paul Di'Anno and all, and it showed you like the
Like a
6
family
degrees
tree.
to everybody. And if there's one thing that I've learned and that we've learned in talking to people on the show is that it's all the same people like living in this. So it's not surprising because it's like, yeah, you have that web. I bet you could draw your own little Iron Maiden / Ryan Roxie, lineage of all the people that you've worked with, because I mean it's ridiculous as far as from the Slashes of the world to you're playing with Alice Cooper, which I consider just the definition besides your show that you have, but you're a defender of the faith, sir, which in the sense that you are bringing a legend's music still alive for a whole new group of people. You are defending the faith of rock and roll. Besides
carrying
the
the
guitars,
torch.
you're carrying the torch
of rock and passing it on to the
and
next
teaching
generation.
them. You're teaching those people some culture.
Just remember, we're all, you have that saying of you're 6 degrees from Kevin Bacon. You're only 6 degrees from Blaze Bayley. Because Blaze Bayley is actually one of the guys who I had the privilege of having on my podcast, a really cool episode. I didn't know a lot about him before I did the podcast. And you find out that he's done so much, and he's been in the trenches. He's been working his ass off. He was working his ass off before Iron Maiden, during his tenure in Iron Maiden, and then all these years afterwards, because he did make a good amount of records. I think that Blaze doesn't get mentioned, like the way Paul does, as Paul Di'Anno does. If we're going to go down the Iron Maiden,
He's the Gary
rabbit hole.
Sharon of Iron Maiden. And I love Gary Sharon. He's one of my friends, and I think he's one of the greatest singers ever. But if you talk about Van Halen, no one mentions Gary Sharon. They're like, fire in the hole over 8 talking about love. Doesn't happen ever.
If Blaze Bayley is the Gary Sharon of Iron Maiden, I am the Bruce Kulick of the Alice Cooper Band.
I love Bruce. That's my favorite. See, I'm younger, so I
Bruce
like that's my
hates it when I say
favorite.
that,
That's
though.
my favorite Kiss era because I loved his playing so much because I didn't grow up going Ace was the best. I said, wow, this Bruce guy is really tasty.
Well, the only reason I used to say that was because at one point I had surpassed being in the band, in the Alice Cooper Band, longer than the original guys. And that's the way kind of Bruce Kulick was. He was in the band longer than Ace at one point in his career, right? So, I mean, now I could say, I'm the Tommy of, you could switch it, but I like saying Bruce because it'll wind Bruce Kulick up if he does hear this. Hello, Bruce.
Bruce is the man. And
Hello.
R.I.P.
Hello.
to
He's
Bob.
like, hello, Newman. Hello, Bruce.
So going. Oh no, go ahead, Ben. Go ahead.
No, I was saying R.I.P. to his brother Bob, who was also like a huge guy behind all of the sounds, like the step in for Bruce. Like there was Bob every time. So, and I know he passed away, and Bruce has been trying to keep his legacy alive. So it's one of those things where cheers to the heavens because that dude did a lot for rock and roll.
And not a lot of people know he was a hell of a softball player. I was on the Sunday. No, seriously, I was on the Sunday softball league that we would go and play softball on Sundays. And Bruce Kulick, or not Bruce, Bob was the captain of the team. And oh man, I hate if I'm gonna misplace the name. Gilby Clark was always there. Mark Danzeisen, great drummer, was there on the team as well. There was Eric Carr was playing.
Is Eric
on the
Carr
softball.
good at softball?
He actually was. He really was.
So Eric Carr was not only an amazing drummer, but he softball.
Coordination.
Yeah. And who was it? The drummer of Mr. Big. Again.
Paul Torpy. Pat Torpy.
Pat
Torpy.
Yeah, Pat Torpy was on the team as well.
R.I.P. as well to the heavens.
Yeah. I mean, damn, that softball league killed us all.
Dude, holy shit, don't play softball with
Don't play
Ryan
softball
Roxie. It'll
anymore.
fucking kill you, man. Holy fuck.
No, they were great. They were all great, all amazing guys to hang out with. I remember nothing but good times playing those games. And to be honest with you, that was part of the LA hang and everything that I miss now being here in Sweden, because there is no softball. There is no softball league. And this was years afterwards, actually. This wasn't when, actually in the 1980s when there was the Cat House, and it was I was there at opening night at Ricky Rackman's Cat House. So we did have softball games then. But honestly, there'd be like guys would come and play with their boots on. Like their sort of leather boots and cowboy boots. And
Did
so
Lemmy come in full like Nazi garb and play?
It wasn't Lemmy. It was Danny from Faster
That's kind of
Pussycat.
funny though, because that sort of could have happened.
Easily.
He was playing pinball down the street.
If you could have drugged.
Both.
How would you even say it?
Drugged, then dragged.
If you would have dragged, we can't even, I'm having a brain fart of what's the right tense or word of it. But I don't think you can get him away from that pachinko game. I think it was a pachinko. It wasn't even really a video game. It was almost like back in the old school days at the Rainbow Bar and Grill. Lemmy used to play this pachinko. Do you know what I'm talking about when I say it? Because it's a very old school game.
I don't think so.
Pachinko is like an Asian type of pinball, but it's up on a big type of a wall, and it's
Don't they call that plinko, Bob? Isn't it called plinko?
Oh, where you like fling it up and it like comes down?
Yeah, it comes down and all these little things.
Yeah.
I call it pachinko, maybe I completely made it up, or just Lemmy told it to me wrong one day. I don't know. He'd be by that machine.
Oh,
but
that's funny.
Now he's up in that big pachinko game. He's playing that big pachinko game in the sky, I guess.
Oh,
We love Lemmy.
Well,
I have a good
it,
Lemmy story too. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, please tell us the Lemmy story,
please.
because there's no such thing as a bad Lemmy story. It's
There
kind
really
of
isn't.
oxymoronic.
I'm sure there's, Siobhán, I'm sure there's better Lemmy stories out there. And Cory, I apologize for cutting you off with this one.
No, please.
But I got to play a Beatles song with Lemmy back in the USSR. And it was at the Cat Club on Sunset Boulevard. And here's the thing. I was really suspect if he knew the words, because he was in the back, and Slim Jim Phantom, who's the drummer of Stray Cats, is the drummer on stage, and he says, "Hey, I want to have Lemmy come up." And I go, "Okay, what song do you want to play?" "Let's do Back in the USSR." He goes, "He's not going to know Back in the USSR." And I'm like, stupid me. How could I even doubt for a second? Not only did he know the perfect bass line and played it note for note, he knew every single word and harmony. When we went to the chorus, he started singing these Beatles harmony. So I mean, Lemmy, as heavy and as rock and as punk rock as he was, down in his soul, he was a very, very 50s, 60s Beatles guy, and 50s music and Beatles music and traditional, rock and roll back there. So, I mean, and I gained such respect. I always had respect for Lemmy, but that day when we got to play back in the USSR, man, that was a mind blower.
That's an amazing story. And I'm glad that it went down that path, because what I wanted to ask you was kind of how you got your early music influence and what sort of music you were drawn to early on. And just kind of like your background growing up in California, where you're from, right? So you ended up in LA at some point. How did you get into playing, or what was your early exposure to music? And, how did you get drawn to a certain type of music over another?
I got to really thank AM radio, because back when I grew up, AM radio wasn't just talk radio, wasn't just politics, wasn't just sports, wasn't just, UFO conspiracies or whatever. It was actual music. And there was a station up in the Bay Area where I grew up. I grew up outside of Oakland, called KFRC. And on any given morning, I would wake up to Dr. Don Rose. He would be the morning DJ, and he would play, and you have to understand, this is the 70s, so he would play disco, funk, and rock within 3 songs back to back to back. You'd hear Aerosmith back to back with ABBA, back to the Commodores. Then he'd go full circle again and play some Cheap Trick, and then you'd have Kool and the Gang. So it was a really cool mix of what all my influences ended up being when I played, when I ended up taking up music for real.
It's like a musical s'more.
Basically, yeah. Chocolate,
That's amazing.
You always want some
vanilla.
more.
A little chocolate, a little vanilla, a little graham cracker in there. I love it.
You can
So at
decide
what
what
point did-
part has the groove.
Well, I was going to ask. At what point did you start, wanting to learn music or guitar? Was that your first instrument? Like, how did you start engaging in it?
The guitar was on the couch. It was just laying there. It wasn't like a special brand of guitar. It was just this big tobacco burst acoustic guitar, so I could just sort of strum it or whatever. I don't think neither of my parents played the guitar at all. It was just theirs, almost like a prop. And but my dad played trumpet, so I started off with that in the march, in the school band. And I, quickly realized that I was this 3 valves and always taking the spit out of your instrument. It was kind of gross as a kid.
Yeah.
So then I
still
moved
gross
to
in orchestra.
my mom's instrument, which was drums, which I really, to this day, I love it. I'm not a good drummer at all, but I love to beat the shit out of stuff. It's like boom, 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 boom. Beating this stuff out of drums, and it was really good for when my parents eventually did split up, because like almost every parental household was splitting up in the 70s. It was good therapy because I had a drum kit set up in the living room of the house, and then I would just bash away. And I realized, again, guitar had been already come into my life, but I realized that being a drummer, I wasn't going to be able to be in the front, which was all, which I wanted to.
How is the crowd supposed to see what's going on with those pants if you're playing drums? You could not be wearing pants. They don't know.
No one told Terry Bozzio this, but I mean,
well, he was the devil, man. He was the devil. He was the gatekeeper to titties and beer. So you can't apply Terry Bozzio. He is not a normal drummer of this world. That's not even a fair comparison, sir.
Spring Session M, still one of my favorite records. I listen to when I turn people on to it, that are of the younger generations, because that's one of those bands, Missing Persons, that I think gets overlooked a little bit. From such great music, and you realize that the musicianship. No, why?
It's too high pay grade for people. People want to hear Old Town Road. They're basic, and that's why it's the #1 song. I understand this. I'm a DJ. I DJ parties, and people come up. Earth, Wind, and Fire, September. It wins every time. But new music, a lot of it's very, very basic. Missing Persons. Listen to that music. It's so complicated. It's so well written. It's so incredible that most people probably don't have the attention span or even the understanding to realize what's going on. Like you don't realize that Terry Bozzio is playing inhuman drums, which is why it's great, because it doesn't sound like he's trying. But the normal person doesn't digest that, which is why I feel like there's a lot of people that overlook that stuff, and you go back and you're like, holy crap. But it was way before its time in my mind.
Well, for anybody that wants to go educate themselves on some great 80s music, Spring Session M, Missing Persons. I know that the members were in Zappa's band before, and so that obviously gives them all this high pedigree. And I find their records. I think Warren, the guitar player, is he still currently in Duran Duran, correct?
Ben might know.
Come on, Cory. Come on,
Cory.
You're the research guy. Do it.
No, Ben is the resident nerd of all rock and roll history. I'm the classical music nerd, so anything pre-1900 is my jam.
Well, dude, I have a pretty cool. Well, it's not cool at all. It's tragic. Missing Persons story. I saw their last gig ever as Missing Persons, because it couldn't have been more Spinal Tap, because the actual gig went down at Magic Mountain in Los Angeles. You know the place, the amusement park, Magic Mountain. They were playing. I was at the show. Huh?
Disneyland?
It's like Disneyland. It's actually called Magic Mountain.
Oh, it's called Magic Mountain. It's not Magic Mountain at Disneyland. It's called
Six Flags Magic Mountain. So I go to see the show. Exactly. And if you watch the movie Spinal Tap, which if you haven't, what the hell are you doing with your life? You have to watch that movie. But
agreed.
But that's a very important venue in Spinal Tap, because that's where Puppet Show and Spinal Tap are, billed incorrectly. So I'm watching this show, and at one point there's this huge fight on stage, and one of the members walks off the stage. I had found out that right before the show went on, that is when the guitar player told the drummer that he had been sleeping with the singer who was the drummer's wife.
Oh,
Whoa!
What a time.
If it doesn't get more dramatic than that, I mean, and you'll have to figure out all the names because I just left them out. But
Yeah.
you can put the pieces together.
Well, actually, I could tell you, I have such a weird. You're giving me goosebumps because I had a weird, similar story, situation happen to me. I went and saw Stone Temple Pilots. I saw Stone Temple
Okay.
Pilots recently with their new singer, and who's amazing, amazing.
Cool. I got to check it out.
So I'm backstage with the DeLeo guys, who are again some of the greatest songwriters, players of our time. I love this. I love Stone Temple Pilots. I've loved them since '95 or whatever. And I'm hanging out with Robert and Dean, and they're like, "Oh my God, this is the venue." And we're like, "What?" "This is when we decided we had to fire Scott." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Were you ever at our shows?" I'm like, "I was at the last show here." He's like, "Then you were here. Do you remember we did like a 25-minute jam?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do. I remember thinking it was like this weird psychedelic thing." He's like, "Do you remember that we said that like we were starting a new sound?" Well, what happened was literally Scott Weiland walks up to one of the DeLeo brothers and says, "I need to take a shit," in the middle of their set. And he's like, "When?" He's like, "Now." And like walks off stage. And he's like fucked out of his mind. So they start playing, and then he comes back on, and he like.
I think though, in his defense, he's part snake. So I don't think snakes shit all that often. So when someone has to actually, isn't it true? Corey, are you looking this up on the internet? Because
when do
I think
snakes
snakes only shit like about once a week, and so when that happens, I think you have to really be,
Slash should have taught you that, Ryan.
But here is a true story. When I did play with
Every
with
2 days,
Slash,
by
and
the
we were
way.
look-
Every 2
Okay.
days.
For
Every
anyone
two-
wondering, every
2
2
days.
days.
Every 2 days. Well, see, even then, you got to let him do his thing. I mean, you just got to let him go. But when we were looking for singers for Slash's Snake Pit, before we found one of the best voices I've ever been able to record with, in the voice of Rod Jackson. I'm biased, but I just think that motherfucker can sing like an angel. But one of my suggestions was Scott Weiland. My first suggestion when we first got together and we made these demos, and I heard Slash's riffs, and I was able to put some of my guitar parts against his, and we made these demos, and they're slamming, and I was like really excited about it. And I said, "God, who would be the perfect singer? He's got red hair, and he's like screams, and he's just got this amazing person." He goes, "Look, dude, ain't gonna happen. Ain't gonna happen." So that was way back, that when hell will never say never. So my first attempt to get Axl to sing these Slash songs was shot down in flames. But then my second choice, or my second suggestion, I did say Scott Weiland. And Slash goes, "Now why would I get Ryan, a guy like Scott? He's got, where I just came from. You know what I'm just coming from. Why would I go? It's going to be even crazier. I can't." But what happened a couple years later, Velvet Revolver.
Yeah.
There you go. So, I mean, there's no doubt about it. Scott Weiland is a rock star. Will always be a rock star.
Mm-hmm.
Was a rock star, one of the best performers. I got to see him a few times in Velvet Revolver, and I never saw him. I never saw these bands. Like you see D'Antwoord, and you saw Stone Temple Pilots. I never got to see Stone Temple Pilots play with Scott Weiland. And my ex-wife,
He was wearing a dress. It was a little bit weird.
well, my ex-wife said we saw him at the Universal Amphitheater, which is now, I think, the the Harry Potter ride at Universal Studios.
Oh.
They've changed it. but I was lucky enough to play this place called the Universal Amphitheater, which became the Gibson Amphitheater a couple years, and then now it's the Harry Potter parking lot or something like that. But my ex-wife went to see Stone Temple Pilots there, and she just goes, "Ryan, I have seen the coolest rock star ever," and which was, because we were going to a lot of shows back in those days. I mean, I was able to see Oasis at the Viper Room with about 100 people.
Wow.
I mean, and Oasis in their prime, coming off of their second album. It's like,
Well, but Scott Weiland is a testament that, like, okay, as a fan, because I loved Scott Weiland, and there's no question that he was one of the greatest voices of our time, wrote unbelievable lyrics, and was an unbelievable performer and a huge personality. But I can tell you that I saw Stone Temple Pilots, I don't want to say necessarily in their prime, but like definitely in a very good period where they were unbelievable with Scott Weiland. And then I remember I made a deal with my buddy. I got him Scott Weiland tickets at a very small venue with his solo band, and then he got me tickets to Metallica. And I was like, dude, going to see Scott Weiland somewhere small is way cooler than seeing Metallica. Well, we went and saw Scott Weiland, and for the first 15 minutes, he's just dancing with his cigarette, and he's so skinny that it's like, it was sad. It was sad. It was just like watching him, and his band was like third rate, like not even dudes that you would even look at second time walking down the strip. You're like, you couldn't have done better than this. And we walked out. It was literally like, what the fuck? And he's one of the greatest performers ever. So that's what happens when you do drugs, guys. Like, that's what fucking happens.
That's too bad to hear. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's bad shows. There's no doubt there's bad shows with everybody. I mean, I've had my bad shows. I mean, I learned my lesson with doing drugs and performing the hard way. I mean, when I first moved to Los Angeles, and thank God it happened like when I first moved to Los Angeles, because we got this. I was in a band called the Jeff Scott Band, and I mean, I don't think I've ever even told this story on a fucking podcast. This is crazy. So there you go. This is your exclusive.
All right.
I don't. Everyone's gonna go, who's the band? Jeff Scott? What? No, he was on.
It's not Jeff Scott Soto, is it?
No, it wasn't Jeff Scott Soto. He was on Epic Records, and I love the fact that he was on Epic Records because that was the same record label that Cheap Trick was on. So I was, and I was 17. I might have just turned 18. I had moved down to Los Angeles. I got in this band, and we got an opening slot at the Palace, which is on Hollywood and Vine in Los Angeles, opening up for Tell Tuesday 2 nights. And there's a band called Tell Tuesday. There's another great band that I don't know if you guys if you remember this band out of Boston. They have a great single called Voices Carry. Amy Mann, she was the lead singer. Everyone knows Amy Mann. Yeah. Everyone.
But we're from Boston. That's just weird. I feel like I would.
Wait, you're from Boston? You don't know Tell Tuesday?
That's not
sacrilege, dude.
Well, now you've sold me. See, now I've learned something from the defender of the faith, Ryan Roxie.
I got stories, boy. So anyhow, we have 2 nights. The first night actually goes really well, and I'm thinking, great, we got another sold out night, and why don't I just make it even better? Just go in the bathroom, do a little, and, make it better. And I came out of that bathroom, went on stage, strapped my guitar, and for some reason couldn't remember a single fucking part. It all hit me, and I was flubbing notes. I was missing notes, and and so that was it. And I said, no, my party days, obviously they didn't end.
Do you know what your rookie mistake was?
What was that?
You have to actually practice while you're also on cocaine. Because the way the brain works is, so like if you actually do cocaine while you practice, you operantly condition yourself so that when you do the cocaine, it comes back.
Take notes,
but if
kids.
you don't,
that's really bad advice. That's actually promoting drug use.
No, I'm not promoting.
Don't just do it at a show. Practice with it.
If you want to be able to be a proficient guitarist while you do cocaine, like ask Stevie Ray Vaughan. Stevie Ray Vaughan did so much cocaine, but he was one of the greatest guitarists ever in the existence of man. But that's because he practiced on cocaine.
Well, that show for me was Scared Straight. Because after that show, I said, "Fuck it." I don't need to forget guitar parts that I've really put time into learning, and playing, just because I'm on some substance. So I left that behind. And to be honest with you, for all those shows that were in the 80s, all those crazy shows, always straight as an arrow. I might have had a beer or two back in those days, and there might be one of those. The worst thing I think back in the 80s were promo shows and radio promo shows, because you do like 2 or 3 songs, so it's basically just a license to have anything you want off the menu, drink as much as you want, and go up and play 2 or 3 songs. This is our radio promo show. It doesn't matter.
By the way,
we
Ryan,
want you to be fucked up.
Question. So we thought we might cartoonize you.
That's great.
What
Did
do you think
just
about
do that?
No,
Have you
that's Paul, our actual. He's
our drummer
the
in
drummer
Lost
from our
Symphony.
band Lost Symphony. But I've
Paul?
been, but he can't hear you. But Paul, he says hello. The drummer says hello back.
I did the international wave. I think that would suffice.
Yeah,
It works
but,
probably
but the point
everywhere.
is that now we were actually lucky enough we were able to hire him as our guy. So he's like our beats department, our art department. So everybody who's on our show
Excellent.
gets the option. And I said, dude, draw this dude. He's fucking badass in rock and roll. So we drew
love
you
it.
with first off a Kiss like Alice Cooper like guitar. SG
No, it's an Alice
thing.
Cooper song. That's his Alice
Yeah.
Cooper eyes. There's no doubt. I
Yeah.
would love it if
It
that
goes-
was a paint by numbers sort of thing. If you can make a paint by numbers,
Well, he's gonna color it in for you for the actual thing.
But also have a paint by numbers option is the point.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's what I
we
think
can
we should
put it
go
up
for.
there for sure.
Okay, all right.
I hope you approve.
Well, yeah, I'll put it in my merch store.
Well, we'll send it to you. In fact, we'll totally send it to you. If you want to put it in your merch store, go for it. It's our. I was actually going to tell you we'll send. I don't know how to get things over to Sweden, how easy that is, but we'll send it
It's
over
not.
to you. Yeah,
It takes forever.
Yeah.
It's better if I just come there on tour and we meet
Well,
somewhere.
what I was going to say is,
yes.
I was hoping to see Alice Cooper because it's funny because I was just talking to my fiance and I was like, I'd like to bring Haley, her 16-year-old, now my 16-year-old, to Alice Cooper, and she's like, do you think she'll like it? And I said, it's like going to see Phantom of the Opera. It's culture. Like your kid needs to see Alice Cooper get his head cut off. And that's a thing. And if she doesn't like it, then that's her own opinion. And she's
It's
allowed to not like it.
Yeah, it's become a generational rite of passage, I think.
It is,
because
though.
It's a rock and roll rite of passage to watch an Alice Cooper show because it is like seeing the Rocky Horror Picture Show where it is interactive. And it's one of those things. It's almost like, watching The Grinch Who Stole Christmas during
Wow.
the Christmas season, and to see an Alice Cooper show, the script really hasn't changed all that much since the early 70s. I mean, obviously the band members have changed and the set pieces have changed. But if you look at the actual script of the show, it's basically Alice battling good, battling evil, whatever he wants to do, whether it's good or evil, you have to make up your mind for that. That's all subjective for you to figure out. And getting, well, you wouldn't say crucified, but executed, and then coming back, the resurrection. It's almost a story that's like old as time itself. So I think the Alice Cooper show is definite for any generation. And I see that. We see that at the shows. We see 3 generations, sometimes 4. It's crazy to see great grandparents now at the shows.
That's insane. Wow,
It's
that's
really
amazing.
weird.
That's so cool.
Well, I got to tell you that I have to ask because I remember when I first saw Alice Cooper. I mean, I saw you and I remember thinking to myself, man, this guy's amazing. But Alice has always showcased female, unbelievable virtuoso level guitarists. And it's not like they're better than you guys, but it's like he gives a spotlight because and I want to know what it's like. You're in a band now with Nina Strauss, who's an unbelievable guitarist. She's a great showwoman. What's it like to support that, but also like you're a Jedi guitarist of your own?
Well, I think we all know our role. I mean, everybody, that's the reason why I think the band truly does have a synergy within itself is because, and people react to the live band as positively as they do, because everybody knows whose name is on the marquee. There's no mistake, all right? It's not a band name. It is a band name, but we all know who the band guy. We all know that everybody, and it's happened, everybody can miss a show. Everyone cannot be available for one show, and that's works. And the show does go on. One guy, if he can't do the show, there's no show. And so with that in mind, we all know our roles. And I mean, when you say Alice has always had female guitarists, that's not really true though, because he's only
not
had
always.
two-
Always.
He's always.
Now, for
I mean,
always for me and my generation, not like Dick Wagner only when
is
bleed
always
time.
is 2011,
Not Vincent
2011
Furnier.
and on. because because Orianthe came in, I believe it was 210 or 211. So always it can't be the last 10 years.
Well, that's why you have
been around since the late 60s.
Do you see how it triggered you? You're now telling everybody who's listening to this program, you're setting us straight, and it's a great thing because it's one of those things where it's like, you're right. Don't let me revise history with my stupid dumb-isms.
Don't do drugs when you rehearse so you can do drugs when you play live. That's not good advice from Benny. That's really bad advice.
Yes.
And two, Alice has only had 2 female guitar players. I've been lucky enough to play with both of them. I think they're both great in their own ways. Both have their individual strengths. Orianthe, greatest vibe, great soloing, bluesy feel to her. And Nita Strauss, the Hurricane. She's calls herself the Hurricane, and it's well titled because she's all over the stage. A complete show person, a great shredder, knows all that stuff, and a great band member, a team player, because that's the reason why the 3 guitar player attack.
You know who she reminds me of, and I say this with the greatest love, and because one of the greatest show people that I feel is like was overshadowed at the time. But you go back and watch the bootlegs, but she reminds me of like obviously a female version of like Jakey Lee in his prime. Like where like he had all the crazy stuff with all the stuff she does with the guitars and the way she runs around the stage, and she just owns it. And if you go back, obviously Randy Rhoads passed away. So like, how do you live up to Randy Rhoads? But then you go watch those old Ozzy videos from like 84, 85, 86, and Jakey Lee's just owning it. And when I saw Nita the first time with you guys, I love Tommy and your playing. You guys are and you're always out there with different Gibsons and beautiful vintage guitars. And I'm a guitar nerd, so I'm already looking in the back and I'm just like, that's great. And out comes Nita, with her Ibanez, and I'm just like, what? But why? And she could be playing a Les Paul right now. She's playing and she's choosing an Ibanez, and then she just murdered my face. Yeah, and it just reminded me that
she wins you over with her personality, and I think that we play very well off each other. Because the thing about the Alice Cooper band is that there's so many double guitar parts, double harmonies, all the amazing guitar duos that Alice has put together over the years, whether it's the original band, with Glenn and Michael, or if it's Steve Hunter and Dick Wagner. These are classic guitar duos, and we have this luxury now of having 3 guitar players so that one can hold down
back
the foundation.
To Maiden.
One can do the solo, and then the complementing harmony to that solo, and then it just this wall of sound. The biggest compliment I think I've ever received from fans that come and watch the shows, they say, "You guys all sound like one guitar during the verses and the choruses. It just sounds like this force, but then when the solo happens, everybody has their own individual styles, and your sound engineer cranks the solos and makes everybody stand out. And like I said, it's a testament to the crew that works within the show, but also with Alice for allowing us to get that spotlight. Not a lot of bands get to have, especially when they're under a solo name moniker, like Alice Cooper Band. I remember hearing folklore of a piece of tape being put across the stage, and a certain unnamed lead singer had said, "You can't cross this tape." It would be hard to be in a band like that, because especially for myself or Nita Strauss, can you imagine Nita having to be behind the tape? It just wouldn't fly. So, Alice is, if anything, he pushes you forward to the front of the stage.
And it's smart. Because that makes it a show. That makes it a show, and not just a look at me, like follow the spotlight around that one guy. That's why I want to go see you. You guys are actually coming to Boston, I think, in September. So
I was going to say, our friend, our British ambassador Steve Wood has already told me, since he's worked with Alice Cooper and the Vampires, he was like, if you want, Benny, I'll put you on the guest list. Yeah. But now I'm like, I need
to do that. Good for him, because I have no idea how it's going to work. So,
he might be lying to me.
Hollywood Vampire there, like pulling up the strings. Good for him.
Man,
Because
isn't that
all
great?
I know is I've been told is that it's COVID time still. We have no idea what our protocols are going to be. It could be like a lockdown, a bubble sort of type of tour, just depending on where we are on tour.
I'll at least be in the masses.
Yeah,
I'll be in
for
Gen
sure.
Pop.
Just so you know, I'll extend the invite if you're.
Pop.
I know.
Maybe I
this
can
from
actually
watching
get
you.
some of my friends through Steve.
Yeah.
Because he can pull
I'll tell him.
his
He'll watch this. I'll send him the link. I'll
I
give him
want
his
him to pull
exact
the Hollywood
timestamp.
Vampire
Well, yeah,
trump
Hey,
card.
Steve, help the Alice Cooper band out. They
Please.
need help. They can't talk to Alice. They can't look him directly in the eyes. You know this. Everyone knows this.
Don't
okay?
look at his neck.
Don't
Don't look at his neck.
look at his neck. Don't let him. And if Joe Perry's in the room, fuck's sake, just fuck off. Okay. Now that we know this, help Ryan get his boy
I know.
and some of his friends into the show. Will you?
All I
Because
gotta
we don't
tell
know
you
the
is one
protocol.
thing. All right. When I check into a hotel room and we're with the Alice Cooper band, it's a Hilton. When the vampires check into a hotel room, it's usually a Ritz Carlton. So there's a little bit of a difference. And I step on the bus, they step onto the private jet.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah.
Right.
Well, that's like a peacocking fest.
Yeah. Before we
It
get
really
too far
is.
off, you were talking about just the Alice Cooper show in general and the performance with the three guitarists. It's interesting to me because nowadays it seems like a ton of bands, on the album there's 40 layers of guitar, but who wants to hire multiple like just toss those guitarists on backing tracks, send your one guy out there, and now you have like this manageable show, but it doesn't have the same effect as seeing those three real guitarists on stage.
It's not just the guitars too; it's the vocals. There are no backing tracks with the Alice Cooper band except for the cheesy interlude samples, and even those are not high tech at all. We still have, I think, a Dr. Rhythm sampler that we use from like back in the 90s or early 2000s. For the longest time, it was a Dr. Do you remember Dr. Sample?
Oh yeah.
It was I think Boss made it or Roland made it. It was like it was so old school and some you had to press it. So it's our drum tech that actually presses those little samples that we use to this day, like the scream when Alice gets his head cut off. I'm sorry to spoiler alert. When Alice gets his head cut off, that's not really Alice screaming. And
Fired.
The sort of the sample before Poison, the whatever that sound is that Desmond Child
Maybe Feed My Frankenstein.
The lightning and the sort of here comes dinner.
I'm upset now.
And these are really, really old school samples, so it's not like we're on any sort of time code.
Yeah.
Time code does not
that's what
work.
makes it cool. Yeah, there's
can't
some
work.
performance
It couldn't
involved.
Well, that's what I like about your show is that it's so hard, and you understand this, being someone who's in a studio all the time, to not like take apart, like, is there too much bass? Can you hear the guitars? Like, is that vocals? Is that real? Is that not real? Wow, I love how that snare sounds. You guys sound like a backing track, except it's
The
not.
closest thing.
What I was going to say,
Go ahead.
one of the things that I loved when I saw you guys is like one of you fucked up, and it made me happy because I was like, it's real. It's all real. They're fucking. I love it because you were so good that if I didn't know, I was like, are they lip syncing it? I was
gonna say that's another good thing about having three guitarists. Like, it wasn't me that fucked up; it was one of those guys.
Yeah, I think we're so good that I think our fuck ups are on the sample. So every once in a while we have to put a sample of someone fucking up because we never. No, the closest thing that we have to a machine is our drummer Glenn Sobel.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that guy's a
and
maniac.
he is a machine. We actually call him the machine because his time is so steady and he bashes and keeps the foundation of the band rolling. So yeah, that's the closest thing we have to a machine in the Alice Cooper band currently. So
He's also a showman, dude. That dude is like the school of Spinal Tap, like throwing things all over and like catching things and like, oh, here's behind my head, pulling that, and then like here we go. And he's like, just watching him hit. Like literally, he hits like Kenny Arnoff, but then he does all that like Prince style. You know those old Prince videos where they do all that crazy stuff? That's what he does by himself because he's a maniac.
I think this thing, and I never really told him this before, but I think that's way more of a nod and paying homage to Gene Krupa.
Oh, definitely.
One of the old school drummers that used to do that kind of stuff with the snare drum and the
Tidal wave.
So I mean, I know who's the one of the most famous drummers because
Shannon Larkin from Godsmack actually is very famous for doing the that craziness. He was in Wrathchild, and he totally does that.
I'm thinking of a guy 50 years earlier.
Gene
Buddy
Krupa.
Rich. I'm thinking of Buddy Rich.
Obviously,
I get the
those
two
were the
confused
guys.
sometimes, Benny. But
Buddy Rich would come from the grave and smack you fucking silly if you were confused him with Gene Krupa. He would smack you. We know that they were
I was
equal.
not talking
but Buddy
about.
Rich
no,
will
no.
tell
I was talking
Ben, let
about
him
the drummer
talk.
of Extreme.
Oh, Paul Geary.
and Buddy
Oh.
Rich. Yeah, I was. That's what I was doing.
That Geary.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Buddy Rich had a revolving drum kit decades before Tommy Lee. And if you don't believe me, folks, go check it out on the internet. You'll see it like it's on one of those, even before Johnny Carson. It's like an old, like Tonight
Wow.
Show. I think it's even before that. But he literally had a drum kit that revolved and did a 360, and he played drums while it was done. And it was, the thing was held together by, nails and fear and like probably yelling at carpenters all day or something like that.
Oh my goodness.
It
What
happened.
age did you realize that Sammy Davis Jr. was also that level of a drummer?
Actually, just recently, honestly, I just saw him do. I saw a special on Sammy Davis Jr. because it took me so long to figure out.
I had no
that
idea for
he had a
years.
glass eye. I didn't know he had a glass eye either. Was it Sandy Duncan or Sammy Davis that had a glass, or did they both have glass eyes?
Now you're confusing
I
crossing
am
my
not
wires. But I
sure.
know Sammy Davis Jr. played mean drums.
I know, one of the best drummers out there. I mean, he would do all that side of traditional side stick snare drum stuff. But I'm more now interested in if Sammy Davis Jr. had a glass eye.
He did.
Have a glass
Yeah.
eye.
All right,
did.
Corey, our resident
Paul,
researcher.
Paul says that he had a glass eye. Like there's.
Yeah, he got a car. He got a car
wanted-
accident and hit his
Yeah.
face on the steering wheel and had to get an artificial eye.
And one of the best band names I ever heard at, and me and Alice actually agree on this, are the best rock band name, Sandy Duncan's Eye. That was literally a band name that we saw in an LA Weekly when we were on tour together one time. And Alice goes, "What is this band called? Sandy Duncan's Eye? That's cool." So there you go. And everyone, I think, in your audience was going, "Who's Sandy Duncan?" And maybe you guys are all going, Siobhán? Sandy
no,
Duncan?
I don't know.
You don't have any good Sandy Duncan stories?
Nope. No, but I wanted to comment on how cool it is to hear about, the experience of playing in the Alice Cooper band. Because, like, for example, I'm in a band called Starset, and it's the total opposite. Everything is time coded. It's a click track. There's content that pops up at like certain points. So
Yep.
I mean, that is something that I miss out on sometimes that I enjoy in like other projects where there's room for spontaneity.
Like an orchestra.
Yeah, same with orchestra. That's what I love about orchestral music. Like you were saying, the wall of sound. There's so much dynamic. You can have all the instruments playing at once, and then all of a sudden something drops out, and there's like a solo, and it just comes out of nowhere. And that's so cool when that happens in rock music and in other contexts. That like very cool writing and the way it's all orchestrated and arranged makes a huge difference.
I think that's the one thing that the four of us sitting here on this screen that have a little bit different. I think it's a bit different than what the new school musicians are. Even if I could pass on some sort of good advice, not the advice that Benny was giving early, but some good advice is in one word, dynamics. Because we all know about dynamics. The three pianissimo to
Yeah.
where's the
Fortissimo,
if you go
yeah.
PPP to FFF, and I think today everything's just F.
Do you think that that's why people like are starting to gravitate back towards records because there used to be dynamics? Because if you listen to those old classical recordings, they go from whisper quiet to fucking loud. And if you're deaf, like in a band, you can't hear what they're saying or what they're doing when they're playing quietly. You have no idea. So you're like, that's why they compress the fuck out of everything. That's what Oasis did, was they basically made a record that was so loud it gave you noise fatigue. So one of the things about records is that they have a much larger dynamic sound range mostly than CDs. Now people are going back to having more of a range. But do you think that that's kind of why people are going back? Because those old records, it sounds different than the Beatles remastered now, where you can hear them breathing.
I don't think that at all, though. I think it's a really good point, but I think the reason why people are actually gravitating back to records is for two things. One, musicians have finally realized a small way to take back and make some income out of music. And something tangible is something that a real fan of your band will actually have and appreciate. And for the fans themselves, that experience, the experience that I preach about and you guys probably talk about all the time, of listening to a record with cool headphones on, cool 70s, and reading those liner notes while you're listening to the music, and you're just like either dreaming of like what you want to do in life, or just basically doing whatever, but you're engrossed in the experience of listening to music, reading liner notes. I think that whole thing is what's gravitating people back to some sort of fascination with vinyl, and the fact that look, musicians need some sort of income off of music. Music, unfortunately, has become a promotional tool for other things, whether it's touring, whether it's selling merch, whether it's actually selling their podcast or their subscription to Patreon or whatever.
And on that note, this episode is brought to you by Lost Symphony. Go to lostsymphony.com and buy a signed vinyl of Chapter 3, which is out right now.
Has some pretty good guitar players on it, Cory. Can you tell us what guitar players are actually on? Or maybe Siobhán, can you tell us what guitar players? Do you even know what guitar players are on Chapter 3?
We have Marty Friedman. We have Alex Skolnick. We have Angel Vivaldi. We have Richard
Wait, who was
Shaw.
the last guy? I missed that.
Angel Vivaldi.
Angel Vivaldi.
Yes. We have Richard Shaw.
Oh, wow.
Who else have we got? Ben, Cory?
We got Nuno Betancourt.
How could you forget Nuno? He's going to be so mad if he watches this, which he won't, but if he watches it, because I'll send him it. He'll be like, why didn't you say my name first?
Because I get to hear it enough from you.
How do they all fit on the bandwidth? That's so much guitar for so little bandwidth. I mean, there's
it's spread out on different songs, so every song features some different people. That would be a lot of guitar players.
It's like that thing, too much metal for one hand.
Yeah, right? Well, our whole thing is more with this project. So,
so speaking of dynamics,
we'll send you some vinyl if it's even possible. Probably not. I'll email you MP3s or something.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll like it. You know what? It's one of those things where we had this delusion of exactly what you said, that I remember David Gilmour saying for the last Pink Floyd record, which has no vocals, that they released with Richard Wright before he died. I hope people listen to this with headphones on. The whole record from start to finish. And you and I know that that's an illusion for most people of a certain age. Like no one does that. They know songs. It's on random.
This is what the music comes out of,
Yeah, exactly.
So
I hope that we can send you some stuff and that you'll just sit down with headphones and listen to it. And I know that you do this all the time. So basically, I'm asking you to work for free.
This is how I know you're an old schooler, Benny, because you said, for one, I'll send you, again, like email. You'll email me an MP3.
Fax you. I'll facsimile
you. An MP3 file. You said a file.
Yeah.
The thing is, people don't even do MP3s.
I'll send you the link.
That's like even another. I mean, at one point it was cutting edge to do an MP3, but it's like now it's all about you just send me a link so I can just.
We're gonna burn you a CDR and. We'll make our own Sharpie label.
Can you send me a DAT tape of that, please? Because
I have it on Betamax, actually.
Yeah. Listen, at this point, we're at the end of our first hour here.
Round one.
With Ryan, this is a blast, man.
A lot of fun.
Thank you for hanging with us.
An honor. Thank you so much, Ryan. Where can everyone find you? Like, what's the best thing? Like, what are we promoting at this moment, other than the fact that you're a legendary guitarist? You have In the Trenches, which is a great podcast. Defending the Faith over there. And you played with like a lot of people from Slash to Gilby Clarke. We'll talk about that in the next episode, but where can people find you?
The easiest and quickest way to find me is ryanroxie.com, because that'll lead you to all the different other veins. But I'm most active on Instagram and obviously YouTube, which is Ryan Roxie Official on YouTube. Just go onto YouTube and put in Ryan Roxie. You'll find my channel. Would love for you to check out all the content, videos, podcasts, music videos, interviews. Everything's there.
Sounds great. And we'll have links below. This has been 2020 2020-D.com. We'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, I'd rather hear, instead of hearing some wizard on the guitar that's just absolutely killing it, and there's so many of them out there that just, make you want to put the guitar down. I'd rather hear that weird kid who's got a weird outlook on life, who's got a weird style, was born in a cave and comes up with the weirdest stuff you've ever heard. I'd rather hear the creativity in a guitar player than somebody who can just murder every scale. I want to hear somebody who can take a scale and tear it apart, flip it upside down, and do something you'd never expect out of it.